which goes into more mobile design, and like to share that with you. So we'll follow up with you and get you the deck after the webinar that has all of those details. I'm not going to talk about that part on the webinar. I'd rather save it for Q&A.
Hey, Tim, I just lost audio on you. Are you still there?
Yeah, I sure am. I'm here.
Oh, yep, there you're back. Sorry about that. We lost you for a second.
Oh, no, that's okay. So just by way of some quick background to understand our perspective, we work with our clients as a partner to accelerate the digital parts of their business. And we do that, of course, by changing the user experience, by recommending different technologies on the marketing technology side, training their own internal staff to be more effective at conversion rate optimization. So we have a real broad perspective. We really go beyond the landing page or split testing to really move the needle on whatever parts of the business we can get our hands on. And we work with lots of clients. You've probably heard of a few of these, but my vice president of business development said I had to put this slide up. All right, enough of that. What I'd like to talk about is the webinar content today. I'm going to talk about how dominant mobile is and the mobile usage patterns that we're seeing and why it's different from desktop, and some guidelines for you on how to develop high converting mobile websites. And as I mentioned, I'll have very detailed mobile conversion usability guidelines, kind of the nuts and bolts of this in the appendix that you can look at later, but I won't be going over that in the webinar. And as I go along, please, please, please ask questions through the question pane, and then we'll get to those at the end and try to answer as many as we can. All right, well, let's talk first about the dominance of mobile. I keep hearing this phrase all the time, which is, next year is the year of mobile, or this coming up year is the year of mobile. Well, the reality is that's already happened. The year of mobile was last year, and the year before, and the year before that. In fact, we have evidence that back in somewhere between 2013 and 14, the number of global users of desktop versus mobile crossed over. There are more mobile users of the web than there are of the desktop web, if you will. And you may say, well, Tim, what does that mean? Of course, there are more users because more people have phones and occasionally they're on them, but they're still probably chained to their desktops and spending most of their time on there. Well, in fact, it turns out that's not the case. In fact, most of our time is also now spent on mobile devices. So this also happened a couple of years ago in 2015. It crossed over. That green bar at the top was where we spend our mobile time, was bigger than the desktop and laptop and tablets, other small things like categories like that combined. So there are not only more of us on mobile, there are more of us spending more of our time on mobile. And that's really the big change for a lot of us. So let's talk about what this means to us as marketers in practical terms. And this is some research from Affiliate Window. And it turns out that in terms of the total number of conversions across all of the different clients that they tracked, 63% were happening on desktop. Or another way to put it, you're missing out on about a 50% growth opportunity if you're not converting mobile effectively. So that's really the focus of today. And if you want to do some quick takeaways, I've made these convenient tweetable screenshots for you. We spend most of our time on smartphones these days. All right, but how do we spend that time? The next question is, what are we doing on there, and what are the characteristics of that usage? Well, one is that smartphones are frequently used. I'm not going to do a formal poll of this, but in your mind, think about how many times you use a smartphone every day. The average user, how many times do they touch their smartphone and interact with it daily? I bet you most of you were underestimating it, because the number is 130 times a day. Now, Most of us are in online marketing. We like to think of ourselves above average. That actually means that we're probably touching our phone a couple of hundred times a day or more. So it's happening always. That thing is omnipresent. When you wake up, many of us, the first thing we wake up to is actually the alarm on our smartphone. When we go to bed, it's one last look at the social media messages before we turn the lights out. The phone is always with us. In fact, there's some research for the millennials in the audience that might shock the rest of us. 91% of them admitted using phones while seated in the bathroom. Now, I really can't make fun of that being a Gen Xer, because back in my day that just meant reading a newspaper or a magazine, so we had our own things we did in the bathroom, just old school, non-digital media. But these phones are always, always with us, and we interact with them all the time. So given that the phone's with us, we hear a lot about apps, and oh, I'm just going to have the killer app. Well, newsflash, there's already a killer app on mobile phones, and that is email, mobile email. This is the biggest usage shift that's happened in terms of online marketing when mobile came along. And the shocking statistics on that are that over 2/3 of people first open their email on a mobile device. 70% open their emails first on a mobile device, and half of them will only open that email on a mobile device. Think about that. So what are the implications of this for you as a marketer? Well, one thing is make sure your emails are mobile optimized. That's just common sense, but given the limited amount of real estate on a phone, you should be having very short, punchy headlines that show up in the preview part of the phone, because if the headline doesn't catch me, I'm not opening the email, and if your call to action's in the body of the email, I'll never see it. So it's really important to have compact, punchy, attention-grabbing headlines that intrigue or make me want to open the email in the first place. But then again, half, remember, are only opened on a mobile device. Well, what's the implication for the landing page, and what are the implications for where you send them out of that email? Well, the implications are your pages that are linked to from inside of email should all be mobile optimized and mobile friendly. Most of us don't do that. We just send them off to our blog post or some other desktop design landing page in many cases, especially if you're going to link to it from mobile devices or from emails rather. Every link out of your email on a mobile device has to be mobile friendly. Really, really critical. If you want to pick up some quick value, try going through your latest marketing emails on your phone and click on every link. First of all, notice how hard it is to click on some of those links because you didn't make them big, fat, pressable areas. Instead, you still have tiny text links in many of your emails. But assuming you did click on it, where does it take you? And is that a good experience on a mobile phone? Oftentimes, you'll find it's not. So you want some easy wins? Take a look at all of your emails on a mobile phone and all of the downstream links that they lead to on a mobile phone. All right, but the picture is actually a little more complicated than that. This is some research from Google. It goes back probably four years now. But one thing they were showing is that we use devices across different situations. We cross devices. We're watching TV and using our phone. We're on our laptop and using our phone. We're on our laptop and watching TV. It's not a linear world anymore. You have to kind of get the attention of people wherever they are. And by far the most dominant is phone-assisted TV watching, as it turns out, or multitasking, as some of us like to call it, although all the neuroscientists say that's not really a thing. People can switch context very fast, but they can't actually multitask. All right, one note for those of you that are doing international marketing is don't forget that there are still dumb phones around. We're so biased by having the latest large screen smartphones or on high-speed networks that we forget that there are a huge number of simple phone users out there. So if you're talking about mobile and you're talking about the developing world, make sure that you're working with the formats and the mix of different devices that are actually out there. I've seen this bias a lot. It happens in different ways in the West. People, for example, on 30-inch, nice, beautiful, high-end Macs are usually the graphic designers, and that's what they design for. It doesn't look so great on smaller screens in many cases. So there's a bias based on how we're experiencing the world, and don't forget about the folks that are still on the dumber phones. Again, I encourage questions, so go ahead and keep typing them in into the question box in GoToMeeting, and then we'll definitely get back to them. All right, so we've talked about how time is being spent on mobile. We've talked about the different usage patterns on it. I want to talk about why it's really fundamentally different than other types of web experiences. It's not about the device itself. It's really about the context that's different. So if you take a look at these three pictures that I've thrown up here, the person in their office in the lower right on their computer is stationary. They can concentrate. They can spend large amounts of time on something. If you take tablets, they're taking us into a more mobile environment. Phones, though, are really the most portable of all. But they also come with the challenge of not knowing the context that the person is in. So let's really kind of put on that, okay, I have a phone in my hand scenario, and think about what that really means. And what you'll find is that the physical environment comes into the forefront. It really dominates. So I'm moving. Again, I'm multitasking, although that's not really a thing, but I'm switching tasks very quickly. Often I'm using one hand to operate the phone. I'm using it outside. It could be cold, it could be raining, it could be windy, it could be sunny and glary. Have you ever had trouble seeing something on your phone because it's bright outside? Absolutely. It happens all the time. And most importantly, we're impatient and interrupted or interruptible. Lots of things as we're moving through the physical world are demanding our attention. It's not such a contained, well-defined setting as an office where things are a lot more predictable, and hopefully it's not as messy or as loud in your workspace, so you can at least try to concentrate. Another important aspect of the mobile experience is it's usually time sensitive. I'm looking up a movie that starts in 15 minutes. I'm trying to meet friends for dinner and trying to figure out how to navigate over and find parking at the restaurant. All of these things are time sensitive. And they're often, in addition to that, what I call a short burst. Now, for example, you might have a text messaging exchange with your friends to coordinate plans or something like that, and then it dies down. Or you're looking up sports scores at halftime or at lunchtime on your phone, and then the game's over and you don't come back to that activity. So it's very bursty. It's not it's kind of even activity throughout the day, like checking your email or browsing the web. A lot of mobile experiences are not only time sensitive, but also short burst. And to add another kind of layer to it, we have to figure that the phone is the best proxy for where we are in the world. Like I said, we always have it with us. If you have location turned on, all kinds of tracking can be done on you, but you also can get the benefit of being able to know where you are in relation to other things. So it's location specific. So to go back to that movie time or restaurant example, yes, it was time sensitive, and yes, it was short burst, but it was also location specific. If I type in, best sushi, which is what I plan to have for lunch today, I don't mean, I'm in San Diego, I don't mean best sushi in New York. It's highly specific to where I am. It's better be best sushi within 15, 20 minutes of here. Otherwise, I'm not interested in it. So if your business has a location component, multiple locations or something like that, the location intent can be very, very strong. And it has to be relevant to my area or where I am. All right, so what does that mean for us as marketers? Let's get into the more practical stuff of designing mobile websites and how to think about that. And I bet many of you have heard this in the office. Actually, let's do a quick poll. There's a poll inside of GoToWebinar. Well, I guess there are no polls. We can't set it up on the fly, but maybe in the question part, tell me if you've heard this imperative spoken at your workplace. Just type it in, yes or no. We're getting somewhere already. We need a responsive website. You hear that? Everyone's heard that, right? We need a responsive website. No one asks why we need this, but we need one. We really need one. And so what's the answer usually? I'm getting yes, 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 of course. I haven't gotten one no yet. Everyone's heard this. Well, the answer is usually to draw what I call pretty boxes. So look, we have a great desktop experience, and it pretty much looks the same on a tablet, but if we put it on a mobile phone, we can collapse it down to one column instead of three across, and we'll have this wonderful experience for everyone. That's what responsive websites are, right? And here's what they typically look like in real life. On the left here, I have the whole page. They're kind of zebra striped. They have all these alternating sections, and we just essentially putting one page after another, so you can just scroll down and through the whole experience on a mobile phone, and that's what it's going to look like. And what's wrong with this? By the way, another question, I bet most of you will answer yes to this as well. How many of you have one of those? Well, at the conversion conference event that I used to run, which is now called Digital Growth Unleashed, one of our keynotes, Richard Banfield, spoke these immortal words. Most responsive websites are infinitely scrolling pieces of crap. And I strongly second that. They're not the best thing for everybody. They're a compromise that suits nobody. And why is this, what I call responsive light, a problem? Well, first of all, as you noticed when I showed you the zebra stripe page, it breaks the idea of hypertext or links. The whole idea of the web, at least in its text form and its infancy like we're using it now, is that you can just jump to the information you need. Doesn't matter where it is, you can just cross-link to it. Click on a link or a button and you're somewhere else. Well, what do we do on one of these scrolling one-page websites? Basically, all we can do is figure out what order to put the sections in. So we're just saying we're actually going to guess at the best order to put these pieces in, and the whole website is just one long scrolling page. So all you can control is what order to put the sections in. It's no longer hypertext. It's no longer linking to other information that's self-contained or having an arbitrary order. You're enforcing a very strong order by telling me the order I have to scroll down in. It also actually changes based on the visitor context. And I'll show some examples of that later. But there's some resizing of columns, but some things just don't look right when you reflow multiple columns. So things that used to be kind of side by side now are one after another, and you don't even see them together. And this distorts the spatial relationships as well. Things that used to be contained and close to each other are now distorted and stretched. On a wide monitor, you might have the call to action, which is pinned to the lower right corner of your phone, now be pinned to the lower right of a giant monitor, so it's actually out of your field of view. So all these things like proximity, ordering, containment, grouping of things, basic web accessibility standards, kind of all go out the window when you start having stretchy stuff. And don't let anyone convince you otherwise. You have to really spend a lot of time QAing these. Okay, how does it look on a large monitor? How does it look on a laptop or a tablet or a phone? And by the way, it's not just phones. If you're not checking how it looks on iPhones or the latest Samsung Galaxy, or actually an iPhone that's a couple of generations old, which still a lot of people have, and so on, you're going to get very different experiences. Web operating systems and operating systems in general for mobile are very particular. So what flavor of it do you have? What exact screen size do you have? What other apps are you running? How powerful is the processor? How fast is your connection? All of that's going to really create a bunch of different experiences. So testing this quote-unquote single responsive code base is still a huge, huge issue. All right, so what's the bottom line on this? Well, I'll be real subtle about it. Responsive, like one-page websites suck. Do not do this. Okay, now again, just for some honesty, can you type in "I'm sorry" if you have one of these into the question box? Let's just be honest. It's like therapy for online marketers. Who's going to be the first to say, I'm sorry, yes, Tim, I have one of those. I'll give you an extra incentive, which I won't tell you about right now, if you do that. All right, moving on. So how should you treat website design for mobile? You should think of it as clean sheet redesigns. It shouldn't be tied to your desktop site. It should be something that you design from scratch. And probably most of us, when we design websites, we do a bit of this, overstuffing. And the only thing that, what's wrong with it in a mobile context is that we have a different context. And we don't need everything we need for the desktop, but we kind of feel bad losing anything that we had on the desktop site. So you go, well, yeah, 2% of people might use this, 1% of people might use that. So pretty soon you take your mobile stuff and you add to it, and it ends up pretty much being like your desktop site, just laid out differently. And we really have to kind of take a different philosophical approach. I love this this book called The Little Prince by this French author, and there's a line in it that is absolutely perfect. Perfection is achieved not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. I mean, I'm sure there's a few Apple users in the group, and a lot of the loyalty that comes to that accrues to Apple is because of their design, because of the simplicity of their design. Most PC laptops have the touchpad, the mouse pad, and then they have a couple of keys, or PC mice have. The Apple laptop does away with the notion of keys completely. It's all just touchpad, and you have different gestures and a different language for doing that. But in terms of the user interface, it's been simplified, and that elegance and that simplicity is very, very hard to achieve and to get right, of course. But that should be kind of your approach. So let me show you this as a practical matter in the real world and how this might look. This is the desktop site for Chase Bank, and I just want to point out some features of it. So they have for their customers a direct login. That's that blue section in the upper right, user ID and password. They have a prominent mortgage rate offer, get the best mortgage rates, and they have an open account option in the second row there with the little checkbook and pen. Okay, now let's think about this. Which of those things don't make sense on mobile? Well, the things they've gotten rid of. They did a really nice job on their mobile version and changed the whole user interface. Now, of course, there's some web usability things that they're doing right, like they have big pressable areas. But look at the actual options. So they still have the login option, but now they don't expect that you to type it in. They expect you to click on that and then log in. They have new options strictly for mobile visitors. Remember, you're on the go. What do you more likely want to do? Find a branch or an ATM. That's a location-specific, on-the-go, time-sensitive thing. Where is the nearest ATM or bank branch? When I get to the branch, I also want to know, is it open right now? I don't want to drive somewhere and find out it's not open, right? So time-sensitive and location-based. And contact us, just a real quick shortcut to contact. Now, notice what's not in there, and that is the open checking account option. That's been removed. Why? Well, it's pretty simple. Somebody would have to be a real masochist and like to walk on broken glass to try to do a checking account opening on their mobile phone. Here, fill out this 17-page form. Make sure you have your Social Security number and the past 3 years of your tax returns. I don't know. I'm not saying they need that, but the point is to go through a complicated form-based interface on your phone is about the most demanding thing that you can ask from someone. And so we suggest, and they correctly kind of follow this, that you don't do it. How likely is it that someone's going to actually want to open a checking account on your mobile site? So they've gotten rid of it. The general approach that I'm describing is called progressive enhancement. And it basically means that for each context, you really need to have an adaptive experience, not just a responsive one. Now, some of you that are maybe not as technical are just wondering what's the difference between adaptive and responsive. Well, responsive means that you're going to have the same information, you're just going to repackage it differently. Again, multiple columns being collapsed to one would be one example, but the menu options don't change. They might just be hidden behind a hamburger menu. Whereas adaptive actually says, based on the kind of device you have or the current screen size, we're going to have a different experience for you. So progressive enhancement allows you to do that, to kind of think, okay, at a certain width or device type or screen size, we're going to do something different. We're not just going to lay things out differently, we're actually going to give you different functionality. And again, typically you do this at the breakpoint by the different types of device. So for phones or tablets, or laptop and desktop. There's some question, by the way, I'm sure a lot of you have, just want to say this right away, that of where tablets belong, because they are mobile, you can take them with you, but, well, the same can be said of laptops actually. But how are they used? Well, we think that they're much closer to their laptop cousins than they are to the smartphones. The real estate is not as constrained. They're all at least 1024 pixels wide. That's a lot of screen real estate. A lot of them are, retina display or hyper resolution or whatever you want to call it. So there's plenty of room to pack in what's essentially a desktop web experience into them. And yes, you have to realize that they're not usually typing on a keyboard, and you're fat fingering stuff, and you have to have adaptations for thumb scrolling and bigger pressable areas. But basically, you could say that you really only need two versions. You need your smartphone version and your desktop slash laptop, or sorry, slash tablet version, because tablets represent only 3 to 6, 7% of most site visits or web experiences. So I think it's pretty safe to lump them in with the laptop experience. If anyone violently disagrees with that, give me a shout out in the questions, or if you have a follow-up question to clarify that, I'd be glad to answer it. So let's see how this works in real life. I live in San Diego, as I might have mentioned, and the public television station here, called KPBS, is an affiliate of NPR, National Public Radio. So there's a couple of things I want to draw your attention to, and one of these is basically the dual branding. So here we have NPR and KPBS. And then they have two navigation bars. They have the main navigation bar that you can see here, and a supporting navigation bar and a search box up near the upper right. Now, this is all wonderful stuff. Let me see if I can show you what this looks like on their desktop, or rather their tablet and mobile versions. Now, it looks a little bit similar, but a few things have changed. So first of all, you can see here that now on the mobile version, we have everything hidden behind a hamburger menu. Whereas on the tablet version, we actually have a reduced nav bar. So we still have the two nav bars, the main one and the supporting one, but they're now 5 options and not 7 options, and they're different on that main menu bar. And the branding has been collapsed to not show the local affiliate. It's now showing just the overall national branding, if you will. So you can see how the functionality is changing, not just the layout. The organization of information, the information architecture, the menu choices you have, all of that is changing. All right, let's talk about another important aspect that I mentioned and touched on earlier, which is location awareness. So when I'm going to the Starbucks site, good chance I want to find the nearest Starbucks. Of course, they're on every corner, so I should just look around and I'll probably see one, but that's an answer to a different question. So one of the things that they ask me for when I go on their mobile site is, where are you? We want to know your location, allow and block. Now think about the difference between that and typing in a zip code, because they also have a store locator on their site, and that's, enter location, so I can type in the zip code there. But which is easier for me to do a 5-digit zip code and hit the go button, or to click one button that says allow location to be used? The answer is obvious. And so one of the things you should do is always take advantage of location awareness whenever you're doing anything that, if your business involves location limited areas. Another thing that happens, and I touched about this as a problem with responsive light websites, is that you should make sure you're using proper proportions. So I went to the Williams-Sonoma website, and they basically have what used to be small pictures on their site now taking up their whole page. These are now giant banners. This is about how much screen real estate you'd see if the phone was actually open. And what you see are 3 full-size pictures and 2 half pictures at the bottom. So it's a problem because even though you do shrink things down for mobile, there's a certain lower limit that you're not willing to go below. So you're saying, okay, if I do have pictures, they're not going to get any smaller than a certain size. And that, unfortunately, has the effect of pushing things off the bottom of the page. So important category level navigation can't be seen because they have some promotional, crap on top, some specific discounts or gift cards or club credits, a couple of offers right below that, and you can't even see what categories of stuff they sell. So be really careful about how small you're willing to make things, and if you're going to freeze them to a certain minimum size, see what's left on the page, see what's pushed down the page as a result of that. That's very important. All right, let's take a look about how to make this a little better. So if I want to have big areas, I need to kind of take over the whole screen experience. So on the ESPN website, if you click on their hamburger menu, it does a nice big slide out, and it's got a full menu under there with pressable areas, with little icons that make it easier for me to find stuff, and so on. And carrying on with the sports theme, USA Soccer here, if you look at their mobile website, they do a great job by making pressable areas really big. So it's okay to have pictures if the picture in this case is the link to the article. So they've kind of combined a pressable area, a background picture, and the article title, and anywhere you press on any of those areas will take you to the relevant article. And down at the bottom, they've permanently pinned the search and the hamburger menu. So you never lose context, but that's not now at the top of the page, it's actually at the bottom, because once you start scrolling, you don't need that anymore, and you're paying attention to the content that you're scrolling into view. So some great use of mobile design on that site. Another thing I want to talk about is site speed. Now again, in terms of our biases, we look at our mobile sites and our mobile experiences on a desktop. Usually we might have an emulator or something like that, but the reality, and most of us have seen this, even in big cities, you don't have fast coverage everywhere. It's kind of spotty, and Verizon can talk about their wonderful networks, and Sprint can say we're within 1% reliability, but the reality is there's dead zones everywhere. And so a lot of times what you have to think about is 3G speeds. Yes, I know it sounds bizarre, but think of everybody visiting your mobile experience as having 3G speed. So how can you make things faster? How can you make things more lightweight? I really like this Alaska Airlines website, their mobile one. So by the way, you can see the big green button on top. They're suggesting you download their dedicated app, and if you're a frequent Alaska flyer, that's probably a good idea. But even their desktop is very mobile friendly, but if you look at how lightweight it is from a design standpoint, think about the number of graphics on these 2 screens that I'm showing you. There's tiny little icons for the calendars, for example. There is the home symbol and the Alaska logo, which is just a transparent outline against blue background. And there's thin gray key lines around pressable areas. So very, very lightweight. Not a lot of graphics in this, and that's a good thing. So just give me functionality. You can specify a rectangle with a background color. That takes just a few bytes of information to specify. How big is it? Where is it? What's the background color? Red, green, blue values. But don't use photographs. Don't use big images. Again, a lot of the sinners that are using responsive websites are also using gigantographics, because if it's responsive, it's designed to work on any device. Well, if you code it wrong, you're probably pulling in the highest resolution possible images. So you have some background image, or even, God forbid, a background parallax, one of those video loops that plays in the background, and they're designed to look great on a 60-inch flat screen TV. Well, guess what? You're downloading it through a tiny straw 3G connection onto the phone. So that 20 megabyte background image is really not okay. First of all, you shouldn't have them, but if you do have images, you should code appropriately so you don't download the biggest versions. You should code appropriately so that you pull down the one that's specifically for that device and has been size optimized in terms of file size. All right, one other thing though is I've talked about delays. It's inevitable that you will have some delays. And it may not be the loading speed or the connection. It might be some server-side stuff that you're doing on your website. So here's some quick guidelines for how to indicate delays to mobile users. And it depends basically on how long the delay is. If it's a real short delay, you can do just a spinner. It doesn't matter how much time's gone by. It's just one image that's cycling. If it's a slightly longer delay, then show it as a progress indicator, file download size, that sort of thing. And if it's really long, and this is an example from Dropbox, while loading the new version of mobile Dropbox app, they actually distract you. The loading program or the wizard that's doing it throws up these little informational screen fills. Did you know that when you take photos, Dropbox keeps them safe for you? Why, no, I didn't. But just reading that is distracting me from the fact that something is taking a long time to do. So use the appropriate distraction mechanism or way to communicate delays to the user. But here's where things get fundamentally different. A lot of times on mobile sites we have the wrong response mechanisms. Now what do I mean by that? Well, a response mechanism is kind of the call to action or the mechanism by which you want them to interact with you. So here's a perfect example. This is the contact page for a mobile website. I think it was for a local pool design contractor, I believe, or something like that. So what's wrong with this picture? Anybody spot this? This is the contact form on their mobile website. Okay. It's on a phone, folks. What might you want to do on a phone? Yes, I know it's a supercomputer and a G-force sensor and a video watching device. It's a lot of things. It's also still a phone. And when you have a mobile site and you don't have your phone number on it, that's a problem. So the response mechanism here is wrong. And it has to be appropriate for the context. So here's our homepage on our website, for example, and you can see in the upper right here we have a toll-free number. So if somebody wanted to call that, they can pick up the phone, a separate device, mind you, and call. But what about on our mobile site? Should it be the same? Should we just have the number? Or should you do something like this? Now, if you look at our mobile website, you're going to see that we have a click-to-call button with the toll-free number on it. Now, you don't even have to remember the toll-free number. Actually, putting the toll-free number, we believe, kind of gives you the sense that it's a telephone and draws your attention to the fact that it's a telephone, but it's just a button press. And you press it, and it switches to your dialer app, and it already has the numbers entered, so all you have to do is hit the green Start Call button, and you're there. Now, compare that to the wrong response mechanism. Let's say we just left it as a toll-free number. What would I have to do on my mobile device? I'd have to rehearse that number, put it in my working memory, switch to my phone app, type it in without making any typing mistakes correctly, and then hit the green button. Do you see how mechanically that response mechanism is much more unwieldy than making it convenient for me? So you have to think, if the phone call is what we're trying to get, the response mechanism needs to change just from a display of some digits to an actual click-to-call button, for example. And other response mechanisms may not be appropriate. For example, apply for your bank checking account online right now. Like I say, maybe you don't even have that at all. So really think about what's your response mechanism. And here we're going to have a kind of perfect segue, I think, into what Conversa does. A lot of times, I first did this presentation for a landing page software company that wanted you to create landing pages more easily. And I said, well, what if there is no landing page? I mean, this is kind of where it's headed on mobile. So when I look for a bakery on Google, guess what Google gives me? The first ad there is actually a mobile ad. They want me to not click on it, not go to their website. They want me to call. They have a click-to-call button, which I've already mentioned. So think about, bypassing the web experiences altogether. And this is what you should be focusing on. How do you optimize your call responses? How do you pick up the phone? How well trained are your staff? Are you able to measure the efficiency of what they're doing? Are you able to route calls to the right people? Are you able to automatically detect if it's a pissed off customer calling or if it's a hot prospect? All of these things are now possible with technology, but the point is, it's no longer about the desktop experience. It's no longer even about the mobile web or even the mobile app experience. It may be bypassing that completely, and if you're on a phone, the phone call is what you should be shooting for. A lot of times these are much more valuable, and the studies that we've done with our clients, phone calls are usually hotter leads. They're willing to talk to you right now, and therefore they're 5 to 10 times more valuable than a typical form fill online or some other conversion action like a download that you may have. So if those are really the super valuable things, how are you measuring, tracking, and optimizing your call performance? So we have some time for Q&A. Here's my contact information. Again, we'll get the deck to everyone who registered for the webinar. And as I also mentioned, go back to this just so you know, there's a whole appendix with a mobile preparedness checklist at the end of this deck. I'm not going to go through it, but at this point, I want to throw it open for Q&A, and I would strongly encourage you to just start typing in some questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. Brett, do you have any other thoughts before we jump into the Q&A?
No, I thank you again, Tim, for that presentation, and I'll echo kind of your last kind of main emphasis point of how valuable inbound leads are, and we do a lot of research on that, of course, and have found similar to what you stated there that inbound calls typically convert at 5 to 10 times the rate of a normal kind of web form fill type lead. So optimizing for those makes all the sense in the world if you're trying to generate the most amount of ROI on your marketing dollar. So I would just second that from my perspective. So yeah, please enter in some questions that you have, and we can get those answered here. Let me just go through. I don't see any questions as of yet that have come through. I've got a thank you and a couple of other responses, but I don't have any questions, so maybe we won't.
Christian, says I currently have a responsive site. I noticed that all the mobile pages were specifically M. How do I get mobile pages without duplicating my website? Okay, when we had this discussion, I think this will be helpful for everyone who's still on the webinar. With some of our clients, a lot of them are redesigning their mobile experiences. And so I just want to set some guideposts around that. First of all, Google has said, and this is some misinformation, that they want you to have a responsive site. Why do they say that? Well, it's easier for them to index it. It's just one code base, one site. There aren't different versions for them to crawl or do stuff with. So that's their strong guideline, mainly because most people will screw things up unless they do a responsive site. But if you actually look at their statements and their top-level people who I've talked to, they don't require responsive sites. That's absolutely not required. What they want is good user experiences, and how you implement that is up to you. So you could have an adaptive site, you can have an M. site. What is increasingly important is that Google is now going to index within the next few months your mobile site. That's what's going to get indexed. So if you have a really, really well optimized desktop site and you don't get your mobile site figured out, that's what they're going to be crawling. They're not going to have two separate indexes for mobile and for desktop. They're going to use your mobile site as the thing they index. So just something to be aware of.
We got another question here. What are you seeing as most common breakpoints for responsive type sites?
Well, I would say it's not so much about the screen size as the device type. So again, if you can determine that my operating system is Android or it's iOS, that gives you a real good clue that I'm on a smartphone. If you're still on Windows 10 or one of the desktop Apple systems, you should basically be looking at the operating system, and that pretty much gives you all the guidance I think that you need. Wouldn't necessarily and think of it in breakpoints in terms of pixels or the width of the screen. Although our own internal thinking is that anything above 1024, which most tablets and laptops obviously are, in terms of width, is plenty to even create multi-column experiences. The one thing I would caution on is that make sure that thumb pressable areas are always big enough to press things on, and you don't shrink those.
Very good. Next question is, what are you seeing as most? Oh wait, that was that same one. All right, I think that's it. All right. Don't see any other. Oh wait, here we got one more that just came in. I'm hearing I will need a mobile site that is completely different, separate from the domain I have now.
Yeah, I would. Well, no, it could, again, how you implement it could be still www and you have a responsive code base, or you could call it m dot and have a dedicated mobile site that's a completely different experience. The top level domain, of course, doesn't change, company.com. It could be m.company.com for mobile devices versus www for desktop devices. So yeah, I would go to kind of two different sites, but the mechanics isn't important, and well, in the sense of you still have to do the hygiene stuff right, but any technical approach is still going to be okay and valued by Google if you do it right.
Got it. All right. Next question is, what layout on mobile do you recommend for lead generation companies that only collect user data?
Great question. Let's see. I would say that if you're looking at lead generation and you're talking about filling out forms, make sure that you do single column only. And never put stuff side by side in terms of text input fields. Don't put first name next to last name. Put first name above last name, and so on. You should also think about drop-downs and controls. Drop-downs are very hard to do, the mechanics of it. I talk about this a little bit in the appendix that you can download in my deck. So try to change some of the choices. So if you have 50 state drop-downs, a long scrollable list of 50 states isn't even going to fit on a smartphone screen. If you have radio buttons, those are hard to work with, so try to change them to thumb pressable areas, so little rectangular pads. Sometimes that makes it a lot easier. So think about, you're operating everything with your thumbs, and it should be single column, and you may have to change some of your controls. The other thing to do is to break things up into distinct screenfuls that you can control. It's okay to have multiple steps in your process, even 8 to 10 steps or more on your form, as long as each screen is a well-defined little atomic operation. So, for example, we work in lead generation with educational companies. So tell us about your highest level of education. Tell us about what course of study you're interested in. Tell us about where you live. So each screen is a little tiny screen, and you're collecting the information in bite-sized chunks.
Good. All right, and then a follow-up question from Mike is, if he doesn't always know that the viewer is using in terms of iOS or Android device, what suggestions would you have on that?
Well, I think these days, and you can pretty much automatically get that. So they're using a browser, then you can pull that out of the browser environment. So you can tell the current viewport size, you can tell the operating system, and you can tell which version of browser they're running. You can tell all those things. So you can absolutely tell. I don't know of any way to effectively anonymize all of that information. So I think you should be able to do that. And if you don't know, then I would say still default to the most compact experience. You don't want to give them a desktop version of your site when they actually are on a phone. So.
Perfect. All right. I don't see any other questions. So I guess that we'll wrap up with that one. Thank you again, Tim, for taking the time to come and present this. Like I've said, we have recorded the webinar, so we'll have that posted and get out. And then also Tim will send out the deck. And Tim, do you want to kind of go through and talk a little bit about Digital Growth Unleashed? And,
yeah, absolutely. Some of you may already know it. May have attended our conversion conference. This is a series that I chair and started back in 2010. We've had a couple of dozen shows here in the U.S. and Europe, and it's all about conversion rate optimization. And next year, well, it's actually starting this fall in Europe, and next spring in Las Vegas, we are having a new show. It's evolved. It's now called Digital Growth Unleashed, and it's about optimizing the whole customer journey, from how you get people there to the web experiences, the phone calls, the marketing technology to make it happen, with a real strong focus on the customer. So if you want to drink from the fire hose and learn a lot about this, mark the dates, May 16th and 17th at the Mandalay Bay, luxurious Mandalay Bay in Vegas. Check out the website, Digital Growth Unleashed. And it's a live-only show, so send the team to maximize your learning. And we're going to have some great experiences there and some very exciting events.
Very good. Good. That's exciting. Well, thanks again, Tim, and everyone that has attended. Thank you for coming and spending the hour with us, and hopefully we can see you back another time. So appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing you on another webinar. Thanks, guys.